Welcome to my channel. If you love emotional stories, please remember to subscribe. Claire used to describe their house as humble but ours. The little two-story with the peeling paint and the uneven fence was not perfect, but it was the place where they built a life. Ethan mowed the grass every Saturday. Claire planted flowers in mismatched pots, and in winter they drank cocoa by the fireplace that smoked more than it should. For years it felt like enough. The neighborhood was quiet, filled with the kind of people who waved when you drove past and dropped off extra zucchini from their gardens. Their routines were steady: morning coffee on the porch, weekend trips to the farmer's market, Friday night takeout from the same restaurant they had been ordering from since they married. For Claire, those details were the fabric of safety. For Ethan, they were threads in a blanket that sometimes felt too heavy. He never complained. He fixed what he could, ignored what he couldn't, and listened when Claire dreamed aloud about repainting the kitchen cabinets or adding a porch swing. He nodded, smiled, and went back to tightening bolts, mowing lawns, or balancing the checkbook. To her, he was steady. To him, he was waiting. They had lived there nearly a decade when the storm came. It began as rain, the kind they had seen before, tapping against the window while Claire folded laundry and Ethan dozed in the recliner. The weather alerts buzzed on their phones, but Claire brushed them off. "We'll be fine," she said, as she always did. But the sky darkened faster than usual. The wind sharpened, rattling the shutters. Ethan went outside to tie down the trash cans, but the gusts nearly knocked him over. By the time he came back inside, hair plastered to his forehead, the news anchor's voice on the television was urgent. Evacuation orders are now mandatory. They didn't have time to think. Ethan threw blankets and bottled water into a bag. Claire grabbed the photo albums, her grandmother's quilt, and Lily, their nervous terrier mix, while the sirens wailed like an endless alarm. The sound of the wind was a roar, alive and angry. Branches cracked outside, debris slammed against the walls. By the time they reached the shelter, soaked and trembling, they could barely hear each other's voices over the chaos. That night was a blur of crying children. Flickering flashlights and prayers whispered into the stale air. The shelter smelled of damp clothes and fear. Claire clutched Ethan's arm, whispering again and again that it was going to be okay, though her eyes betrayed her terror. Ethan pulled her close, his body steady even as his heart hammered with dread. He kept his gaze on the exit signs, telling himself they would get through this. Hours later, exhaustion pulled them into restless sleep. Claire's head rested on Ethan's shoulder. When she stirred awake in the middle of the night, she caught him staring at nothing, jaw tight, as if holding back thoughts he couldn't share. She squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back, but said nothing. The next morning, when they returned to their street, the house was gone. Not damaged. Gone. The roof had caved in, the walls collapsed, everything they had built reduced to splinters and mud. Claire dropped to her knees in the street, hands over her mouth, as if holding in the scream. Ethan stood still. His eyes scanned the wreckage, the toppled fence, the broken porch, the cracked dishes half buried in mud. The tree in the front yard, the one he had hung Christmas lights on every year, was snapped in half. His chest rose and fell slowly, like someone holding back a tide, and then quietly, deep inside himself, he felt it. Relief. The realization horrified him. He didn't let it show, but when he reached for Claire to lift her up, the thought burned in his chest. I don't have to stay here anymore. For days they stayed with friends across town. Claire mourned like someone who had lost a piece of herself. She scrolled through old photos, tears dripping onto her phone, whispering, "All our memories, gone." Ethan held her, murmured reassurances, but the truth inside him grew heavier with every passing day. She would sit at the borrowed kitchen table, staring at nothing, and whisper, "That house was our life." Ethan would rub her shoulders, kiss her hair, and say, "We'll build again." But inside, he was thinking, maybe somewhere else. Maybe this is my chance. One night, as they sat together in silence, Claire finally asked, "What are you thinking?" Her voice was small, but her eyes searched his face, desperate for comfort, for the words that would anchor her. And Ethan, tired, worn down and careless with his guard, whispered, "Maybe it's for the best." Claire froze. "For the best?" He swallowed hard. "The house, I never loved it the way you did. I stayed because you wanted to, but now, maybe this is a chance." Her breath caught, her eyes wide with disbelief. "A chance?" "Ethan, we lost everything." "I know," he said quickly. "I know how it sounds. But maybe, just maybe, it's the start of something else." She pulled away, shaking her head. "You're glad it's gone?" He reached for her, but she moved further. Her voice was sharp, breaking. "All these years you hated it here? And you never told me?" Ethan's chest tightened. The truth, spoken aloud, hung between them like a crack in glass, widening by the second. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said softly. "I wanted you to feel safe." But Claire turned away, tears spilling down her cheeks. For the first time since the storm, the silence between them was worse than the roar of the wind. And Ethan realized that while the house was gone, what they were losing now might be far harder to rebuild. Claire barely spoke to Ethan in the days after his confession. They stayed with friends, sleeping on a borrowed couch, moving around each other like strangers in a kitchen that wasn't theirs. Every time Ethan tried to reach for her hand, she pulled away. Every time he opened his mouth to reassure her, she turned her face. At night, when the house went quiet, she cried softly into her pillow. Ethan lay awake beside her, listening, his chest aching with the knowledge that he had broken something that might never be repaired. The storm had taken their home, but his honesty had cracked their foundation even further. One evening, she finally spoke. Her voice was sharp, trembling with anger and grief. "How could you hide that from me all these years? How could you pretend?" Ethan sat at the edge of the couch, his hands pressed together. "I wasn't pretending. I loved you, Claire. I still love you. I just never loved that house, that place. I thought it was what you needed, so I stayed quiet." Her tears spilled faster. "It wasn't just a house. It was our life, our vows. And you were waiting for it to disappear?" The words sliced into him, but he didn't look away. "I never wished for destruction. But when it happened, I felt like maybe we had been given a door out, and I wanted to walk through it with you." She shook her head, whispering, "I don't even know who you are right now." The days stretched into weeks. Relief funds were distributed, volunteers cleaned the wreckage, and Claire tried to imagine starting over in the same town. But every time she mentioned rebuilding there, Ethan's silence betrayed him. She saw it in his eyes. He couldn't do it. One night, as they walked the temporary neighborhood streets, Claire asked, "If it were just you, where would you go?" Ethan hesitated, staring at the dim streetlights. Then he said, "North, to the city near the mountains. I've thought about it for years." Her heart clenched. "And you never told me?" "I didn't want to take you from what you loved. I thought silence was safer, but silence has cost us more than I ever imagined." Claire stopped walking. The weight of his words pressed down on her chest. She thought of all the times she had begged him to open up, all the times he had smiled and nodded instead of speaking. And now she realized he had been carrying a whole different map of their lives, hidden away. The anger flared again. Do you know what it feels like, Ethan? To realize that all the years I spent making that place a home, you were secretly wishing for somewhere else? He reached for her hand, his eyes wet. I wasn't wishing against you. I was wishing for us. For a life where I didn't feel trapped. I stayed because I loved you. But when I saw that house collapse, it felt like maybe God himself was saying, "It's time." She pulled her hand back, shaking. Don't you dare turn this into something noble. You were glad it was gone. Ethan's jaw tightened. Yes, I was. And I hate myself for feeling it. But Claire, it's the truth. The truth hung in the air, sharp and raw. They slept apart that night. For the first time in their marriage, Ethan wondered if they had reached the end. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining life without her. And it felt emptier than any house, any town. Weeks later, an offer came from his cousin in the mountain city. A small apartment, temporary, until they found their feet. Claire hesitated, but Ethan urged, "Just come see. If you hate it, we'll leave." The city greeted them with crisp air and streets buzzing with life. From their window, the mountains loomed, steady and vast, like sentinels watching over them. Claire wandered the sidewalks, unsure, while Ethan looked lighter than she had seen him in years. "This feels like breathing," he whispered one evening, watching the sunset paint the peaks. Claire studied his profile. For the first time, she realized that maybe he had been suffocating all along, and she had never noticed. It scared her, and it softened her all at once. But anger still burned. One night she confronted him again. "I can't forgive you for being glad our life was destroyed." Ethan lowered his gaze. "I'm not asking you to forgive that. I'm asking you to see me, to see that I stayed all those years because of you, not because of the place. And now I want to build something with you, here, where I can breathe. If you can't, then tell me and I'll go back. I'll go anywhere you need. Just don't shut me out forever." Claire's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to demand why he hadn't told her sooner. But instead, she saw the man who had carried boxes into that old house with a smile, who had fixed leaky faucets, who had held her through sleepless nights. She saw his quiet sacrifices, and for the first time, she wondered if maybe she had been blind too. The turning point came on a rainy afternoon. They visited a small cafe tucked in the corner of the new city. The smell of bread and coffee wrapped around them. A young couple sat in the corner, laughing over shared soup, and Claire felt a strange ache of recognition. She and Ethan had once been like that. When she looked across the table, Ethan was staring at her, not with expectation, but with a kind of patient sorrow. And in that moment she realized he wasn't asking her to erase the past. He was asking her to choose the future. She reached across the table, her hand trembling, and placed it over his. "I hate that you felt relief. I hate that you didn't tell me. But I don't hate you, and I don't want to lose us." Ethan's breath shuddered out, relief flooding his eyes. He turned his hand and gripped hers tightly. "Then let's start here. Not with what we lost, but with what we still have." The months that followed were not easy. Trust was slow to return. Some nights the silence between them was heavy, reminding them of the storm. But other nights, laughter came back in small bursts, like fragile sparks. They explored new neighborhoods, argued over furniture, and discovered that starting fresh was both painful and exhilarating. One evening, Claire stood on their balcony, watching the city lights shimmer. Ethan wrapped his arms around her waist. "You know," she whispered, "this doesn't feel like running away anymore. It feels like home." He kissed her temple. "Because you're here. That's all I ever needed." Tears pricked her eyes. For the first time since the storm, she believed him. Years later, when people asked how they survived losing everything, Claire would smile faintly and say, "We didn't lose everything. We found where we were meant to be." And though the storm had ripped their house from the ground, it had also stripped away the silence between them. In its place grew a love more honest, more fragile, and yet stronger than before. The truth had nearly broken them, but in the end, it had set them free.